Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fish and Chips. This is the first episode of a potential podcast series that we want to do, where we dive into the underground side of the poker world. It's not always pretty, and it's not always flashing lights, but there are a lot of very interesting stories that we want to talk about. So, welcome to Fish and Chips.
Pilot episode 1.
So, I'm here with Tim. Tim is definitely not a made-up name.
By any means. None of the names we're using are made-up names.
They're all made-up names. In
They're all
fact,
made-up
we're not
names.
even going to tell you what city we are in currently. Everything's going to be kept confidential, and we're doing that for a number of reasons. But the idea of this podcast is to potentially bring on people who run games and who just basically the poker community in general. I would say there's a lot of very interesting stories.
I mean, there's a lot we can talk about. We have dozens of topics that we've even ran through over the course of just the past little hour or so, just things that we could talk about. We don't necessarily even know where to start. We have a list of a dozen things that we could probably talk about over the course of the next 12 hours, but I think we're going to try to limit each episode to 1 hour. We've got a few things that we can touch on today, from just big games, kind of where we started from, playing little 1 cent, 2 cent games online, to fast forward to today, where I just today I think I profited $8,400 from a local underground, what is essentially a 5-5 $10 to $25 straddle PLO game that runs almost every single day a week, actually, here in a city here in the Midwest in the US of A. So there's a lot of different things that we can talk about, kind of the journey on what it took to get here, and all of the dirty and the clean, and I think it'll be fun.
So let's start with you, Tim. Where did you start
with poker?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think like everyone else, as in high school or even kind of in college, we would play I don't even remember the stakes we were playing, but I bet we thought we were high rollers for playing little $5 sit and goes. None of us even knew it was considered or called a sit and go at the time. But I never really played my first hand of raked poker until I was 26 years old, which was about 3.5 years ago, where I had always had an interest in poker. I don't even remember necessarily how I got started, but I do remember the very first deposit I made to Bovada, which is now Ignition Poker, was $100. I had no idea what I was doing. I very quickly busted that $100 playing like maybe what I think was probably like 25 NL or something like that, which was kind of like a demo example of what I wanted to try to do. And then I think like a couple days later, I was like, all right, I'm going to try again. I think I studied poker for 2 or 3 hours, so I was now an expert, and I deposited another $100, tried to play some 5 NL, and I probably played what had to have been 20 to 40,000 hands of 2 cent, 5 cent over the course of like 6 months. Like before I ever 12 tabled, or before I ever tried to play 1,200 hands an hour on Zoom. This was still like when I was fairly early on, so I was probably only playing 2 or 3 tables at a time, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I played a lot of $3 what was a triple up kind of format on
Ignition.
Yeah,
I know what that is.
Played a lot of those.
Yeah. It's a one table where 3 people triple up.
Yeah.
So it's nine-handed, and as long as you make the final 3, there's no first, second, and third.
That was it.
The first 3 all triple their money. So whatever the buy-in is, if you make it to that last 3, you triple your money.
That was fun. I won a lot of $9 stacks first year.
Do you remember the first time that you played in a casino?
I do, very vividly. Were you there?
I was not there, no. But I know that when I walked into the poker room the very first time to play, it was probably the most intimidating moment of my entire life.
Okay, I will one up that, because before I ever even played a raked $1, $2 game at like the age of 27, which is kind of hilarious thinking about it, because a lot of people, get started when they're like 21 or whatever. I went and played a free, quote unquote, free bar poker tournament, which was like you just tip the dealer $5. at this local restaurant that we would go to, but the first place was, like $500. So they would actually get like
massive fields.
Yeah, like actually like sometimes up to like 150 people that would all come and play in this quote unquote free bar poker tournament.
Everyone there was a professional.
Yeah, everyone's amazing. They're all high stake.
Everyone judged every hand that was played and told you how to play poker.
And they still do. I haven't been back for a couple of years, but I guarantee it's the same
hard to break out of that bar poker scene. It's hard to get out of that.
So I remember the first time, even before I went and played 1-2 no limit at a casino, I remember playing this free bar poker tournament, and I was so nervous. Because like you walk into this place where like the lights are dim, everyone's like super serious, and like you grow up your whole life watching World Series of Poker. This was it, man. This was like the main event. This was bar poker. I was nervous.
I actually, one thing I was impressed with at this bar, because I played there. This is how I met.
Oh, this is how we met.
This is how we met.
Like 3 years ago.
The dealers are actually really good.
Yeah.
There, they you tip the dealers $5. They run the game, and they're all really good dealers, which surprised me. I was expecting either pass the deal or just people who maybe dealt a home game once every month or so. But no, they all knew what they were doing. And they do not make enough money to put up with the shit that bar poker.
I mean, these bar poker dealers are definitely better than like most people dealing like the World Series of Poker in Vegas when
they're all awful. Well, not all of them, but my God, the
so these
WSOP dealers are.
Most of them.
I would say 40% of them are pretty horrendous. But anyway, not to.
So what's funny is like I bet. So my very, very first goal I ever remember setting in poker was I had played online for maybe like a few weeks, and I was like, someone online told me I need a poker goal. So my first poker goal is I'm going to turn this $100 into $565 so I can go play the Colossus. That was the very first goal I set. And I remember I achieved that. It literally probably took me like 7 months to go from like $100 to like $600. And I was like, I freaking did it. And it felt good. I remember I
freaking did it. Took it to Vegas, busted in 3 minutes.
Wait, did I make day 2?
That
was the very first like what I would at the time would consider like a big poker tournament where it's like $565 entry. And I remember I actually did make day 2. I actually almost made the money, which would have been a really cool story to look at. But I basically busted like, I think half an hour before the money bubble or something like that. What's funny is there's very few hands that I play nowadays that I remember like the exact way I busted, where like, I'll go home the next day and what's your name, Carl? Carl is like, how'd you bust? And I'm like, I don't freaking know. I shoved 20 big blinds with something, like doesn't matter. But I still remember busting with King, Queen of Hearts in the Colossus 3 years ago. I remember I opened like the hijack and like the button shoved with ace 10 off. And I had like 12 bigs, right? So it's like in theory, I snap call, right? I should just open shove myself. Yeah. But I remember at the time I probably like min raised and then like tank called for 12 big blinds or something. And I remember I had King, Queen of Hearts vividly. And I remember actually I went home and told people I busted with ace, Queen of Hearts because it sounded better.
Yeah. I think poker players just in general will retell stories to make it seem like they played a hand better.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised you didn't come back and say, you got it all in with aces versus pocket twos.
Gosh, I'm sure that happens all the time.
Or something.
So that was like the first goal I set. And then I remember I came home and I basically, I withdrew. It was the first like withdrawal I had ever made from online poker. And I withdrew all my funds, basically busted it. And then like, I remember I kind of had to like start over. And I remember that time I think is when it really started. It was like the first time poker clicked for me. Where it was like, I think I deposited $100 again, which I'm pretty sure is the last time I ever really played.
Poor bankroll management 101 over here.
It was probably like the last time and like what I would consider, I guess, like my poker career, if that's what you want to call it, where I like had to dip into like my own funds. I think since then I really have never had to like dip into like personal funds to like play poker. And that was maybe 2.5 years ago. I remember that I could go on, but anyways, to answer your question, that's kind of where it started. There's some fun stories along the way of, like the very first time that like I donked off 8K on Ignition and was super depressed. But
I actually want to want to add to that.
Yeah, that happened, I think,
because I was
twice.
living with you at the time, and you. The best part about this is that Tim, you had terrible bankroll management and played way too big on Ignition, but you ran it up to like 8K
multiple times,
and then you wrote a note to yourself that said, "I will have good bankroll management." Yeah. And you stuck it in front of you. And then the next day I came home and you weren't there and looked at your computer and saw that Ignition had been uninstalled. And I just went, uh-oh. And then you came home. I remember vividly you were eating chicken with your hand.
Probably.
And you were so
depressed.
just depressed.
Like so sad.
You were so depressed that you had busted that 8K.
Yeah, because I think I spent what had to have been something like 4 or 5 months basically grinding up like $100 to like maybe $8,000 or something like that with like pretty good bankroll management. Like it was probably like a 20 buy-in thing where like I very quickly, I think like binked some micro stakes tournament or something like that, started playing 25 NL, like went on a heater, started playing like some other tournaments, and like within like a few months I was playing like 100 NL with like pretty good bankroll management. So I was like really proud of it, you know? Mm-hmm. And then like one night, and like this is like before I ever even like picked up a PLO training course, like ever, for some unknown reason I just load up, like I've like barely played PLO in my life, right? Like barely. And then like some devil possesses my soul and I load up 4 like 1K PLO tables basically. Like I'm like multi-tabling like $5 $10 PLO for like the first time in like my first PLO.
Well, you want to start big. I mean, go big or go home, you know.
Yeah, so
you don't really want to learn how to play it. You just kind of want to
why I did
jump into high stakes.
And it was so I think I did that twice, where like almost like 2.5 times, but there were 2 very vivid times, like maybe 18 to 24 months ago, like in that time period, where I donked off what would I guess kind of be considered the majority of my poker bankroll. But I haven't really made a big mistake like that since then, I don't think.
Yeah.
I've had some big losing days or whatnot, but like I've never done anything.
Yeah, you seem to be a lot better with like
your anything stupid like that. Yeah. It's probably been about 8, like in it, because it's not even a concern. I mean, haven't done that for a while.
When we in the early days when we were just getting going, we would play a local game that was a raked 25 cent, 50 cent home game, which was great because I straddled every hand, literally every single hand.
Yeah, that's how I got started.
And yeah, we used to go play that. That's when we first we were getting to know each other. Is we would go play in that game. You'd buy in for $20, and if you ran it up to 60 or 70, you felt like, yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big score. How much in that 25, 50 cent? Do you have any idea, like your best night?
No. I actually don't. I remember playing in that game a lot, but I don't remember any losses or wins.
Yeah, it was just kind of,
which is funny because I have like a really good memory on like other things, but that one specifically, I have no idea. I even remember like a couple of specific hands that I remember like posting to like 2plus2.com and like wanting feedback on like this sick like 25 cent, 50 cent live game. Like, but no, I don't know. I'd probably say I maybe only won like a few $100s after all is said and done for the game, like over the course of like 6 months or something like that.
Even if you're a winning player, playing a raked 25, 50 cent game is borderline unbeatable.
Because I think it was still like, it was probably 10%. Like I think it was actually still capped at like $3 or something.
I think it was $3 or $4.
So it's capped at like 6 big blinds.
Which is absurd. It was
but at the time
massive.
We had no idea.
Yeah.
It was like what $3.
Which is like, generally the poker community has no idea about rake. It's
less than the casino we play at, Herb Derp. Well, yeah, sorry, the stakes are 4 times lower. But
yeah. So that game is still around. It's actually grown to be a little bit bigger now. It's a 1-3 game now, so it does have nights where it actually plays relatively deep.
Because that game has now become like a 1-2 game, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Which I just played at for the first time last Friday. Is that one you convinced me to go?
Yes. So
I haven't played that game in what it has to be close to like a year.
Tim says, because nowadays Tim only plays, 5-5 PLO. So you only play generally bigger games now that you've built your bankroll. You have more money to play.
Yeah.
And so this is smaller 1-2 game. I like
playing 2-5 no limit every once in a while, but even like 5-5 PLO, it's more like almost like what I would consider like a 5-10 PLO game.
So this is a smaller game. This is a 1-2 game. And I've been trying to get, just for fun, I've been trying to get Tim to go and play this game, because it's fun to splash the pot, to mess around.
And remember what I said, Joe? I said, I'm only going to go if.
He said, I'm only going to go if I get absolute shit-faced.
If you pick me up.
And if you pick me up and drive me. So I said, deal. Which I don't know why you ever thought I would not be okay with that. So no,
I was okay with it. I just was like, that was my conditions. I was like, the only way I'm playing 1-2 is if I get hammered.
I text Tim and I say, Tim, let's go play tonight. And he says, okay. And so I pick him up. We go there. Tim buys in for 500, which is 5 times the largest stack on the table. And proceeds to start getting shit-faced and playing every hand very aggressively, which is kind of pushing the buttons of everyone because they're not used to this. But it's great for me. It's fantastic for me to watch this. And then, so Tim you end up getting like pretty shit-faced, right?
Yeah, just like mildly drunk.
No, you were
moderately
drunk.
Moderately drunk.
But that was great because that's what you were setting out to do, right? Yeah. And so then we have the brilliant idea. You should probably get really fucking high.
Yeah. Okay, well, back up a little bit. I've never been high in my life.
Yeah.
Like I've like puffed on marijuana like once in my life, but never been high.
I've puffed on marijuana cigarettes.
Yeah, I don't know
before one
I've
time.
Like never really been high on any drug. But one of our buddies was like, I've got an edible in the car. And I was like, bring it over.
Yeah. So one of our friends says, that's a fantastic idea. I have an edible cupcake. And Tim immediately says, I'll buy that from you. And he says, deal. And so Tim, or our buddy, goes and gets it. And the first thing he says is, this is the dankest shit I've ever eaten before. And I smoke all the time. So by no means eat the whole thing.
Yeah, I think he was like, just eat half of it.
Yeah, eat half of it max. And you proceed to shove the whole thing in your mouth because you're like, fucking YOLO party.
Yeah, I'm an idiot.
And obviously, I don't know if our field, I'm sure some of our audience smokes weed, and so they understand that the effects of edibles take a bit longer to kick in. But you were on cloud 9 for like half an hour.
Like a good cloud.
You were loud and having fun, and the table was loud and having fun. And then all of a sudden I feel a hand on my arm, and it's Tim. And Tim has gone white as a fucking ghost. And he's just whispering. You weren't even quite making like full sentences. Because you were like just, I imagine it hit you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, there was a very distinct moment where it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is too much. Like,
yeah. No going back at that point.
I was like, oh man, I hope this is like the tippy top of the mountain. Because I was like, this is too far. But the problem is, as I was like, the alcohol was still kind of kicking in. So like,
starting to get the swirls.
The next 2 hours is maybe it felt like 6 hours, but
it was like 15 minutes.
Yeah, the next 15 minutes that felt like 3 hours is a blur. Like driving home and whatever.
Yeah, because then you wanted to leave. And so I cashed you out. I cashed out. We both crushed that game, by the way.
Yeah, well, I think I had like a marginal loss.
Oh, right? You did have a marginal loss, but the way you were playing, that's a win because.
Oh, totally. And actually, chip EV wise, I'm pretty sure I should have booked a win because I actually got it all in with like a set against
I remember that
this other guy's over pair, and he just went like runner 4 card flush.
Yeah, non-pairing like 4 card.
I was playing like an idiot.
8 high flush.
I was playing like an idiot, so I just like ripped in like 300 big blinds into like a 40 big blind pot, and he called me with like an over pair.
It wasn't even like aces. He called like with eights.
I think it was like a 7 high board.
It was
and
a 7 high board. It was
something.
2, 3, 7, and he had a set of 2s, and he called with 8s. But so yeah, we were driving home.
He like tank called, yeah.
And then you proceeded to vomit outside of my car for like 10 minutes.
I'm sorry for that.
No. I'm happy you didn't get it in the car. that's what I'm happy about. But anyway, moving forward, so we were talking about when you were playing, when we were playing kind of at the small home game, when 25-50 cent was kind of a big deal. And then you ran it up a few times on Ignition, ran it up and down.
Yeah. But I never
had some
like
swings.
One thing I've always been really, really good at is I'm really, even when I was first starting, my bankroll management was always bad in the sense of like shot taking. Like I always wanted to just play higher and higher and higher and higher. But I was really good at like never busting. I've never like gone into like I've never fully busted, like basically in my entire like poker career. I've gotten close to the bottom, but I've always like stopped myself before I got to like busting my whole roll, so I like could rebuild, like, but not from scratch. So that was always kind of cool.
So what would you say in the poker community, just in general, what percentage would you say of people bust like completely? Because it's really high in my book. I would imagine
98%.
Yeah, I would say probably only about 2% of players actually don't fully bust or aren't in the red.
Well, because most people aren't even like playing with like a poker bankroll, right? Like they're just playing with like their paycheck. So
right.
I would consider that part of the 97%, and then like maybe like 50% is like aspiring to like build a poker bankroll or something like that, but almost all of them bust what is they think is their poker bankroll multiple times. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are always like, how many people do you think beat poker? And like people are always like, oh, 90%, 80%. I really think it's mid 90s, like 90, upwards of like less than 5% of the community is like a lifetime winner.
Yeah,
for a lot of reasons. Because like a lot of things in the world, like poker money tends to flow up. So even if someone is like beating these lower stake games for a long time, eventually they go and play they go shot take. They lose against players either because of variance or they're playing against better players and they lose. So poker in a lot of ways just like works its way up to the highest of stakes. And
that's why you see professionals bust.
Yep.
Is because obviously they're playing higher and higher
all the time.
And then, eventually they do bust when they could just be playing, games like even 25-50, right? Or
even
at it,
bigger.
Not bust, but
like there's a lot of players that could probably consistently beat $2, $5, go play 2-5 at their local casino and grind out like a good hourly. Like I think a good player can very reasonably make $30 to $40 an hour just playing 2-5 at most live games. But a lot of people don't want to do that. Everyone just always wants to play higher, like without exception.
Oh yeah.
Because there's always a bigger game.
And I feel like poker players, unless you're like an 80-year-old retired person who's literally just playing for the social aspect, you kind of have these goals, whether you've, announced them or not. We all think about it like the first time I score like $1,000 in a tournament would be like life-changing, But then you get there and
you want more.
And so you always have that drive to try and win more and more money.
Always. I mean, so since we're using a lot of aliases and we're not using our real names, it doesn't. I'm super proud of like my results the past few months.
Yeah. So the way we were kind of saying is like, we obviously started a few years ago. Obviously, Tim has had a much more successful year running it up than I have, but. I think it's an awesome story. You started at 2 cent, 5 cent, and just 4 hours ago you booked.
I think it was an $8,400 win.
An $8,400 win.
But what's interesting
in how many hours? What was your session?
I mean, that was like a 5-hour session. Obviously, can't do
that. That hourly is terrible.
Can't do that every day. But what's crazy is I basically have been doing that every day for the past 2 months.
The run good is real. I got run good and play good
without exaggerating. Like I don't even know if Carl's gonna believe me when I say some of these numbers, but because I'm not very good I used to be really good about like keeping daily track records of like exact win loss, but like I've kind of stopped caring about that for a few different reasons. But I bet in the past 6 weeks, let's call it, like a month and a half, I bet just strictly off playing, like on PP Poker, including like America's Card Room, because like I've probably lost like 10K on America's Card Room playing like the $2,500 main events like every Sunday the past few weeks, or like just other big like 1K events and stuff like that, and like bricked every single one like I tend to do. So if you include the losses like on ACR, but like live, I'm probably just up something absurd in the past like 6 weeks, like not exaggerating, at least 40K, which is because it might even be like closer to 50, but I would guess somewhere 40 to 45K. And what's crazy is it's all cash, right? So
right.
Like,
and I think I mean, it's nuts to me because I know you on a personal level, right? And it's easy to watch high stakes poker where, you know, they're playing for hundreds of thousands of dollars,
it's on TV.
and it's on TV, and it's, you know, glamorized, and but to see that just on a personal level, which is, you know, your average Joe, and anyone listening to this, I'm sure, plays in like 1-2 games, whether it's casino or home games. Kind of just think how crazy that is. Like crazy, just playing, not even in the casino or big tournament wins. It's just playing locally. And
they're underground ranked games, and like a lot of people kind of play on credit. So I'm like, on days like today where it's like I book an 8.4K win, and it's like, all right, here's half of it, we'll get you the other half tomorrow, which is kind of exactly what happened. And granted, that happens every day, so I'm used to it. But I will, you know what's crazy is and because of the whole girl situation that like screwed me out of $700, and then you went and kind of collected that money for me, which we can talk about if it's an interesting story. After that, there's not a single time in all of my poker career that I haven't been not paid what I've won.
Yeah, and I think
it's pretty cool.
I think that's, would you say that a big part of that is because you're dealing with the people who run the game and not necessarily with players?
I think a lot of it is actually even like, I think I've gotten lucky in that regard, honestly. Yeah. Like every single time I book like a big win and like I don't get paid on it like immediately, I'm like, all right, this is the time where like I get screwed out of 8K.
Right.
Where it's like I'm getting free rolled, because if I lose, I'm going to pay it like immediately. But if I win big because someone, you know, only brought 3K but they lose 10K, and the game owner is booking it. Granted, I only really play at places that they have good enough judgment to only credit the players.
Well, because they're I mean, essentially their assets.
They're responsible for it. Yeah.
Right. So, and that's another thing that just baffles me about these bigger games is the books that are kept.
Insane. I mean,
like. It's
tens
just
of thousands of dollars. Yeah.
Tens of thousands of dollars that's just lent, and it's not like if they don't pay, they can go to the police.
No,
like
I actually can't believe how much. There's like this really weird like honor among thieves things that's also a fine line, because a lot of people have no problem going 8K on the books where they know goddamn well they only have 3K in the bank kind of thing, where it's like. They are, if they lose this 8K, they're not going to be able to pay for it, but they have full intentions of paying it back eventually, or they'll like do something else, like they'll sell their car if they need to, kind of thing, to like pay their debt.
It's straight out of a movie.
Yeah,
like it really is. It's like It's like I lost my car gambling. I lost my car from poker.
I've seen it. Yeah,
I mean we've single-handedly seen poker destroy lives and just break people, and it's just crazy that and you see some of these people who are on the books for thousands and thousands of dollars, yet they are playing every single day, and they're playing big games, and they're not winning players.
And it's not like they're not like break-even players.
No,
like,
they're losing players.
They are getting destroyed fast.
Yeah, exactly. Like it truly baffles me that this isn't uncommon. This is like off the top of my head, I can think of 4 to 5 people that I know on a friendly level that are in these situations.
Yeah. I mean, and we're going to even try to get some of them on the podcast if they are like open to talking about their life and maybe how like if we
this is one of the benefits of it being confidential is we hope that people are more open.
Yeah, because like a lot of them aren't going to want to be like attached to their real name or like have it get back to them somehow. And I can't imagine too many people wanting to come on the podcast and be like, "This is how poker has ruined my life."
Yeah.
But
This episode,
there's a couple people that might, like, and
Yeah.
they might open up how they were like, "Yeah, I took a second mortgage on my home. I've lost $200,000 in the past 2 years. My
Yeah.
wife divorced me. I'm suicidal." Like, who knows? Like, maybe I'd freak. I'll cry with them if it gets to that. Because like, there's some really good heartfelt stories out there that is not on pokernews.com. It's not.
No,
it's not on like mainstream podcasts because everyone talks about the glamorous side of poker. But
no, and that's what we want to do with this podcast. Is we want to kind of explore some of the darker, kind of crazy stories that we see on a weekly basis.
Yeah. And there's a lot to it. It should be fun.
Yeah,
if we can get them to open up about it.
So we talked about kind of poker ruining people's lives, essentially. What are some stories that you've personally witnessed with people who are like just in the hole, like insane amounts of money?
It's funny because I almost feel like guilty talking about it, right? Because like it is anonymous and like it's not really ever going to get back to them. But there's a couple players right now. So even just one today. There's a player right now that let's call him Mike because I'm looking at a microphone. It's funny because when I first started playing poker, I used to think he was a good player. Like 2 years ago when I was first getting into PLO, because that's mainly what I play nowadays, largely because I enjoy it. But number two, I just think the edge to be had in live PLO right now is where the most amount of money can be made in poker. And it's amazing to me how many people I think that are way better no limit players than I am are like almost too stubborn to like make the move for whatever reason. Like they're like, "Oh, I've studied no limit for so many years, I have to stick with no limit." But like, I used to think this guy was a really good PLO player. Now I just look at him and I'm like, "Oh, he's terrible," kind of thing. I've single-handedly seen him lose what has to be over 35,000, like at a minimum. I saw he booked a pretty big win yesterday. He booked like a 7K win, but that was only after I saw him lose 8K one day, 18K the next day. When I left the game today, he was down like 15K or something like that.
Yeah, it's just unreal. And these aren't rich businessmen.
I mean,
some of them.
I guess maybe it's relative, right? Some of them are. Some
of them are. But there are what intrigues me is not people who lose that much because they can afford to. It's the people who lose that much that can't afford to.
Where it's like maybe they had a really good financial life the past 10 years, discovered poker, and then 6 months later they're on their second mortgage. They sold their other car and now they're refinancing their car. Those I think are the most fascinating stories.
Yeah, sad, very sad, but just
what happens.
It's just crazy.
Anyone that's a winning poker player or like wants to make poker a part of their life, like I want to continue to do because I love the game, like just has to be willing to accept that they are largely taking money either directly or indirectly from tens of thousands of people around the globe, or just even in their community that just are ruining their lives because they are addicted to gambling in a bad way.
And I've heard of professional poker players actually stop playing poker because, that almost like hits them.
It's almost like a morality.
Where it's like a morality thing. And obviously I love poker, you love poker. Like we're going to continue to play poker, but there are people who are just like, when you think of it, like me winning is somebody losing money.
Yeah.
It's because in order for you to win, someone has to lose.
Yeah. And I remember like the first time it ever really hit me, because when you're playing online, especially if you're playing micro stakes online, like there's almost no emotion into it.
Right.
I won a $20 pot. Like losing a $20 pot ain't going to ruin anyone's life. But I remember like it had to have been close to 2 years ago or something like that when I was like first getting into like 2-5 no limit. Where basically I remember this one guy basically like slow playing aces or something stupid. And he like got sucked out on like some multi-way all in on the flop on like a wet board and was like disgusted when he lost kind of thing. Right. But then, and I was like, whatever. But then he went on this tirade of like, I'm going to fucking kill myself. Like, my wife is going to leave me. My kids don't love me. Like, I just lost my job. Like, I can't afford to lose that money. And he just went on this rant about like how he was at rock bottom in life, and he like just lost his pot with aces, right? And he's like a terrible poker player. Like, he shouldn't be playing in the first place.
How big was the pot?
Not even big. Not like
it was 2-5, right?
I mean, it was 2-5 no limit. Like, I bet he lost $400 or something like that, right? So it's not like we're talking tens of thousands, but money's super relative, and $400 was probably literally this guy's like rent money, right? Like maybe rent was due the next day for $1,200. He had $600 in his bank, and it was like, I need to go play poker to pay my bills. Lost it, and he just went on this tirade about how like his wife was going to leave him and how he was going to kill himself later that night, which he didn't. But I haven't seen, I don't know where he is now, but that was like the first time where it like really hit me, where I was like, oh, yeah, this is nuts.
Yeah, that's pretty dark. I had a couple times like that where I was playing in a free bar league, and my buddy there, I didn't know this at the time, but my buddy had asked to borrow money for his rent from the guy who was running the free bar poker league.
Okay.
And the guy gave him $200 to help him out with rent. And then after the free bar poker league, we all went out and played poker, and he played poker with that $200 and lost it with the guy that lent it to him.
Yeah, like something like that,
which is
so
just
weird.
Yeah, it's just like, and how I found out about it is like that the guy that he lent him the money kind of pulled me aside and just said, would you be angry if you were me watching him gamble and lose the money that you just lent him?
Well, like even
for rent.
Literally yesterday, I was playing with this guy that's like lost $35K in the past like week or something like that. And like he owed someone that owed me $7,000 basically. And I'm sitting there playing with him, and it's not like it's even a huge concern to me because he basically indirectly owes someone that owes me, and like this guy's kind of good for it. I'm not really worried about that, but it's very odd where he owes someone $7,000 that I know is just going to me eventually, but I'm seeing him continuing to rebuy $2,000 at a time, shoving all in with like any 4 cards on PLO, going 15K into the hole. I'm like, sure hope I get paid on that $7,000.
Right.
Which I did, but it's a weird feeling.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch, and in a weird way you almost become like numb to seeing it.
Totally.
When you see it over and over
again. I mean, there's this one guy that we've talked about a little bit. Let's call him Dragon.
Sweet name, dude.
There's a reason for that. It's just one of those things where he has destroyed his life because I think he claims he does have a good job. I actually am of the opinion that he maybe doesn't anymore. Like, I think he maybe lost the job because he's playing PLO at like a lot of weird times of day where like he should be at work. Like,
right. But he's a business owner, right?
No, I think he just works for I know the name of the company. I'm just trying to like protect his identity. He just works for like a big company in the marketing department where like he claims he gets to work from home a lot, has a good salary, has a bunch of stock in this company that he's been like basically liquidating and selling over the past year. But I bet this guy's, easily down over 100K like in the past year or something like that, like if not 200K. And like he lost he has one kid, but like he got divorced about a year ago or something like that. And like he just, every time I see him, it just looks like a little bit more of his soul has just left his body. Really dark. And I've even had some good, because I almost view him kind of as like an acquaintance friend, but like I've even had some like good conversations with him, like in private, like in the back of these poker houses and stuff like that, being like, dude, like, why do you keep playing? Like I even remember once like 4 months ago where I was like, do you want me to like, do you just want to like not be here right now? Like we can just go to the dinner or something like that to try to get him to like not to play. And he's like, no, man, it's fine. Like, let's just go back in and play. And I was like, all right. Because as soon as someone sits down with me at a poker table, like I'm not gonna play soft against them, like hardly ever. Like there's some situations where I do where it's like really close friends game where like if we're playing like 10 card PLO heads up or something like that.
Are you kidding me? When we play, we play even harder at each other.
Yeah, a lot of times in like a goofy way. But like if someone sits at a serious raked poker game with me, like everyone there, I don't care if they're my friend or if they're like someone I don't like I'm just gonna go after them and like try and win as much money as possible.
Yeah.
And a part of me, and I've kind of said this before too, and it's going to make me sound like a worse person than I am over this podcast, but like I used to really feel bad for these people. I don't really feel bad for them anymore. Like I'm almost just like way past that point where like I almost like gain a little pleasure and like I don't know how to say this without sounding like a terrible person. Like I almost like gain pleasure from like their pain is like what I want to say, but that sounds worse than it is. It's more just like I like winning, I guess. I like winning at poker.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to go through the wall of their pain, you know?
Okay. So you obviously you're a winning poker player. You've studied the game.
A lot.
You've put in
I still have so much to go.
Yeah, no, I feel like there's never playing poker, there's never a roof that you're going to hit as far as learning.
It's crazy.
You can always learn, and that's a common misconception that people who don't play poker understand, or some people who play poker still don't get, is like that's something that I always found funny is you find these old guys in bar poker who are like, I've been playing for 40 years, so I'm really good. And then they proceed to limp call under the gun, you know, with like queen 9 offsuits, you know, and it's like, dude, just because you've been playing for a long time doesn't mean you're a good player, especially like with how the game constantly changes, right? You constantly have to adapt. Like if you look at the old high stakes poker episodes or Poker After Dark, like, it's amazing to see how the game has adapted from those days and how the players have become so much better, you know, from even back then.
Yeah, where it's like you could be like what would be considered like a pretty bad player now by today's standards would probably be like a pretty good winning player, you know, in a lot of these like even biggest games when poker boom was big, which was before my time and whatnot. And I could be wrong, but I kind of finally think poker is finally in a spot where, as you know, people love to talk about GTO and what that is, and I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions around that word. But as the game approaches these higher levels of like GTO or balanced and like good levels of exploitive play and balancing around to GTO and whatnot, whether that's a no limit or PLO or what have you, the game, my point is, I don't think the game is going to evolve much more than it is today.
Really?
My 2 cents. Yeah.
It's an interesting thought. Especially
things like no limit. Like, you know, like almost, you know, you turn on WSOP like 10 years ago and people were still raising, you know, were 40 big blinds deep and they'd raise like 3.2x with ace king because it's a good hand. Where nowadays no one would ever do that. Like a good player is just going to raise, you know, 2x or 2.2x or something like that. I would be willing to bet so much money that like 10 years from now, it's still just going to be 2x, you know, like I don't think there's going to be like a weird.
You feel like the game
is pretty much there.
Has almost like plateaued.
Yeah. As far as like.
But learning, I would say learning it, you will never hit a ceiling.
No,
right?
absolutely not.
There's always ways to.
Well, there's always going to be bad players, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of Texas Hold'em or poker or PLO or anything, is that there's always going to be bad players that think that they're good and don't think that they need to study. Exist. And my favorite bad player is the bad player that has convinced himself or herself that they're a great player, but they're just always running bad.
Always running bad. Which is like every poker player. You basically just described a million people. I mean, because even myself, and I'll be the first to admit it, that like pretty much every poker player is better, you know, than they think. They think they're better than they are.
I think,
including myself.
I think 100. There are people who are like, I'm a bad poker player, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, I just admit it. Right. But I would say the majority of poker players or people who play poker on a regular basis and enjoy the game see themselves as being better than they are.
Right.
And I would say that 90% of those people don't think that they need to study because they feel like they've already reached a limit of losing that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Or it's like, I'm a good poker player, you know. They think they're break even, but really, you know, they're probably down 5K like this year playing 1-2 or something like that. Yeah, it's like, they might even play like 15 hours a week.
And I think a lot of people that maintain regular jobs don't even realize how much money they're losing.
No,
Because
yeah,
if you go back through your bank statements, even with just like going out to eat, $7 a day, whatever, that adds up. So if you're playing 4 or 5 times a month and you're losing, whether it's, I mean, it's relative, but whether it's $100 or $1,000, like that adds up very quick if you're a losing player. But I think a lot of people don't realize that because they're getting constant paychecks and they constantly have money in the bank. And so they just don't see that.
There's a guy that's pretty big that a lot of games are like revolving around him right now. And I say that like semi-seriously because the city that we live in, there's a lot of poker that goes on in our
It's
city.
very surprising that there is.
We're in the
this
Middle
much
West
poker.
with no casinos. The closest casino is several hours away from where
Yeah.
we live. So everywhere where we play is all just what is technically unregulated, illegal, underground rigged games. But there's got to be 7 or 8 games like that run on weekend, like on a normal like Thursday night. Like I bet within a 20-mile radius, you could probably find 5 or 6 games.
Yeah. Easy.
Anywhere
I would
from
say
1-2
easy.
to 5-10 PLO.
And the thing that surprises me is that there's constantly big PLO games running.
Yeah, the past
with like $30,000 to $50,000 on the table
almost every day. And what's amazing is like how these players, a lot of them come and go. Like right now, there's this one player who is pretty new to the scene. And like he's played kind of his whole life, but he only really recently started playing a lot because he basically sold his sushi restaurant for who knows how much money. But when he said last week, I'm down $170,000 this month, I'm inclined to believe him. Like,
I don't think people would generally just say that.
It's almost like he's bragging about it, right?
Yeah.
Because he's like 50 years old. He sold his restaurant for who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like he's obviously very financially like well off. Maybe even like $1 million, who knows. But like you can only lose $2,000 a day for so long,
right?
Before $500,000
that adds up quick.
Goes bye-bye.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not uncommon. There's another guy named have you ever heard of the guy that's, how do I say it without ruining his name? There's another guy that sold this company like a couple of years ago for millions of dollars. I think upwards of like 5 to 10 million.
I think I know who you're talking about.
North.
Yeah.
And he has proceeded to dump, I think, literally millions to the poker community in the past like couple of years.
Which is so
literally
insane.
Like one of like the most interesting hands I've ever played of my entire life. And even if you suck at PLO, you're just going to think this hand is hilarious, because this was probably like a year ago when I first started breaking into like the high stakes PLO scene, where it was like kind of like a 5-5-10 PLO game. And I remember getting into this hand where basically it was a deep game. Like, let's say there was like 500 big blinds effective or something like that, where I basically led into 3 people on the turn where I had like the nuts with like the nut flush or something like that. And he basically raised me, right? Like he's raising me like without blockers, where I just have the nuts, right? Like I just donk led into the field because it was like multi-way, and he raises me. So I'm like, I'm all in. And he snap calls. Here's what he snap called with. It was something like it was like a 7-8-10 queen board with 3 clubs or something like that. So he called with not a flush. He went all, I think, because I remember 3-betting and like he 4-bet all in. I think he 4-bet all in or something like that. And this was like a $5,000 pot. Like this isn't a small pot. And he went all in with what he thought was a straight, in PLO. But then when he flipped over his cards, oh no, I remember what happened, because it was something like 7-8-10 jack on the board. So he had like
a 9.
7-8. He had like a 9, but he didn't actually have like 9-10 or 9 queen or 9 jack. So he didn't even actually have a straight. Like he literally had like a pair or something. So he just got in this like 1,000 big blind pot drawing dead, where like he 4-bet like shoved with what he thought was a straight or something weird like that. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
That's the kind of guy where if you hear he's at a game, you're like, where?
And he hasn't
I'll be
been
there
playing
in 5 minutes, because he has a ton of money. I know who you're talking about. Yeah. He has a ton of money, and so that's nothing to him. And I got into a hand with him. It wasn't as big as that, but it was like $1,000 pot.
Yeah.
We were playing 1-3, and I had ace king suited. He 5-bet jammed on me with queen 7 off.
Yeah.
And I snap called with ace king suited, knowing that he's a crazy player. He turns over his hand, I turn over, and I didn't turn over mine. So, I mean, when I snap call, I generally have ace king is like the bottom of my range in that spot.
Yeah.
And I go, do you want to go twice? And he goes, no, once is fine. And I just think, God fucking damn it, because the 7 peeled on the turn and I ended up losing that hand. But what I've noticed is those like super rich guys, they love just running at one time.
Yeah, because they're not there to they just want to gamble.
Yeah, they're just
they want
there
to
to gamble.
rush.
Absolutely,
and I'm all
yep,
for that.
Yeah, I get it, but.
And I haven't seen him around much lately. I actually think he really is one of those players where like you can only lose $2,000 a day every day for so long before you're like,
I'm actually taking a relatively big
down $250,000 before he's like, maybe I should pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah. And a lot of people will disappear for like 6 months or
then they'll come back,
8 months, and then they'll come back.
They'll come back and be like, all right, business has been good.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got $30K.
Right.
This time I'm gonna win. And then like 2 weeks later, they're like, all right,
I'm on the books for 10K.
See you guys in 6 months.
Yeah. What a
it's
sad
amazing
community.
how many people are like that in our community.
Oh, so many.
It's enough to keep the games like pretty healthy. Like,
and that's what's so crazy about like the books to me.
Yeah.
Is that there's so much money like that's just owed. There's not collateral. There's literally just I owe you like $10,000, and I only have $3,000 or whatever in the bank, and it's and
I don't know how much because I don't run a game, even though we're friends with a lot of them and stuff like that, and like. Even though it happens a lot, I think it hardly ever happens with super large amounts of money. It happens all the time with small amounts of money where it's like, oh, I'll get you this $300 tomorrow. And like, they don't pay it for a month or something like that. But, these games are raking, 8, it's a 10% cap.
7 to 8, right?
7 to 8, depending on the game, where it's like the 1-3 games are even capped at 7, but like the big PLO games are capped at 8.
But the 1-3 games play deep enough to where it doesn't affect it too much.
Yeah, and like, it's not, it's like a basically standard rake, I guess, compared to like most casinos, except there's like no promotions and stuff. But going back to everyone thinks they're better than they really are kind of thing. Like, I'm cocky enough that there are, out of like let's call it, there's hundreds of people in our city that play poker if you include like bar poker and stuff like that. But like if you just include people that play like raked poker, like what, 200 maybe? Off and on, like 200 active players.
Maybe more. You might be surprised. There are a lot of people who filter in and out. There's also a lot of people that play.
Might even be like 1,000 if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
Like 1,000 people that like on any given like 3-month period that will play. Like I'm cocky enough that like I genuinely think I'm in the top 3. Like, because there's just like there's no like wherever I go online or like 2+2 forums or like other forums online, I'm like, oh, the games here are kind of tough. I'm just like, the games in our city are not tough. I'm always surprised there's not like more players here that are good, but it's probably just because it's not regulated. So like, why? There's no reason anyone would ever move to our city to play poker, like ever, right? Like this is never gonna happen.
No, I don't think. I mean, people who are making a living at playing poker, aren't gonna move to a city where it's just raked underground poker.
Yeah, because no one even knows about it outside of it.
Generally, people are going to be playing legally if they can, especially when rake is the same, right? I mean, it would be different if it's like, hey, there's no rake where we live. Yeah. Then that might draw more people. But there's really no reason for people to move their entire lives here to play like games that are just as deep and the rake is just as high.
Where they literally could get shut down or stop it.
Exactly. And it's an illegal game. You go from like a legal game to an illegal game.
They could stop it anymore.
Yeah.
It's just never going to happen.
No. I don't think people will travel. But I'm happy with it. You're happy with it. The players here are...
terrible. I can count on one hand the amount of players that I think are decent. Yeah. 2 of them are sitting in this room. Like, there's like a few other players. 2 years ago, I would have said that very differently. But like, no one else has gotten better. No one else has put in thousands of hours on like runatonce.com or like messing around with GTO solvers or like actually putting in study time in the lab, putting in work, like studying poker. Like, I bet I'm one of maybe one of 3 people in the entire city that's like ever studied poker for more than a day.
Which is just, again, baffles me.
Yeah, that's weird.
It just baffles me. But it comes down to, I mean, it just comes down to, like, I would say that's definitely kind of a cocky thing to say, where it's like, I'm better. But you've also studied, but a lot of people would say that and they haven't studied and they're terrible players.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I can confidently say you are definitely in the very high majority of
our
the
city.
best players in the city. And that, I mean, just your win rate shows.
But it's obviously a crazy cocky thing. Granted, I also don't think that's a bad thing. Like, you even if it's sometimes delusional, like it's important that you think you're making the right decisions.
Yeah.
If you've put in any amount of study time, it's important enough that you go into a poker game and you confidently make what you think is the good decision in the moment, and you're not like second guessing yourself. Like, if you think this is a good spot to 3-bet shove all in on the river as a bluff, go for it, which I saw today, and it was awesome. If you had to ask me, what? There's my real name. So maybe cut that part out. I don't know what time it was. Where's the timestamp?
Okay.
If you had to ask yourself,
keep going,
Tim, when was the last time you saw someone bluff shove in a bluff 3-bet shove on a river for like 700 big blinds? I was like, dude, I don't remember the last time I saw that, because like people just don't bet
the most polarizing bet
shove. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's always for value. They just have the nuts, especially in PLO.
Yeah.
Anyways, I saw that today, where basically the board like super went like bet call on the turn, and then like the board paired, and the guy bet as a bluff. The other guy min raised. Like, he made it 400. The other guy was like raising for value to 800
with
bottom set. It's like bottom full house, basically. He had like pocket 2s, and like the board was like a king, jack, 9, 2, or like he flopped a deuce or something like that. But he was like raising for value with his full house, because like the flush got there was already the straight out there on the turn or whatever. And so he was like, even though granted, if I'm in that spot, I just call min raising value. Lots of things wrong with that, but that's what happened. And then this other guy just kind of like tanked seriously and was like, I'm all in for like $5,000, like $4,000 or something like that. Also, one of the only players that I actually think is like pretty good in the Valley. One of like the few that like I'm like, he's a decent player. And this was the guy that like bluff shoved. And the other guy like tanked, folded, and then he just showed face up. Like that he just had like stone nothing. Like he had pocket 10s on the turn where he was like using blockers to rep the straight. And then the board paired and the flush got there, so he just didn't have any blockers there.
This is when you show it too.
Oh, and this was against the guy that's lost $35,000.
Oh, so super mega tilt.
Yeah, remember how I was telling you before we started this podcast, where I was like, yeah, the game was kind of heated today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. It's like the game had some tension today.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a ton of crazy content and stories that we know on a personal level, and that I'm sure other people in the Valley can tell us about. So the hope is that if we get some good feedback and we get some people that are wanting us to make another episode, we will. We plan on, and we've already talked to a few of the underground club owners that run these big PLO and Hold'em games, and they have some really crazy stories. And so, the hope is that we can keep doing this and we can bring some other people on. So, Tim?
Signing out.
Signing out.
That's it. It was fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Thanks for listening, everyone.